Hey everyone, Richard Metal Fan here, bringing you guys a brand new 2018 album review. I haven't done one in quite a while. As you can see below the title, today we're going to be looking into the new album from the band Parkway Drive entitled Reverence, which came out today through Epitaph Records. Now, everybody should at least probably have heard of Parkway Drive if you're a fan of like metalcore and stuff. Like they're essentially a metalcore band hailing all the way from Byron Bay, Australia. These guys have been around since 2003, and they've been putting out albums since 2005's Killing with a Smile, which was their debut album, which I thought was a pretty good album. Then they put out 2007's Horizons, which in my opinion is still their best album, probably one of the best in the metalcore genre. And 2010's Deep Blue, which I thought was a pretty good album, and the song on that, Karma, which is pretty much the first song I ever heard from them, which got me into this band. And then we go into 2012's Atlas, which I thought was a pretty good, pretty much them at their peak with the metalcore style. But it wasn't until their last album, which came out in 2015, which was Ire, where they sort of decided to change things up. And sort of like slowly started to stray away from the metalcore stuff, but go into more like heavy metal stuff. Which, I mean, you could tell with like Vice Grip, it still had that metalcore style, but you could tell that they were starting to experiment. And with this new album, Reverence, the band's overall sixth album, you could tell that they definitely are trying to like steer away from the metalcore stuff and go with like straight up heavy metal and different styles. And you could tell they experimented a lot with this album. And the question to remain, does this album live up to Ire and exceed expectations? In my honest opinion, it kind of does a bit. I mean, but I honestly think Ire is still better. I liked Ire a lot better, but that doesn't take away from Reverence. I thought most of these songs are pretty good. You could tell like they experimented a lot. Let's talk about the vocal work. What can I say about Winston McCall? One of the best metalcore vocalists I've heard. Like, the dude has, like, insane range. Like, it do, like, low guttural screams, some just some great shouts and stuff. And he actually does some really cool stuff. This is the first, like, time where he actually does, like, a lot of, like, clean vocals on one of the songs, which I'll talk about later on. He could definitely showcase this sort of, like, a newfound vocal range and styles with this album. It's pretty good. Guitar-wise, I mean, Jeff Ling and Luke Kilpatrick, I believe, they've come up with some really great riffs. I mean, Jeff's soloing and shredding on this album is just all over the place. Like, dude's a fucking shredder. Bass-wise, the bass is pretty audible. You can hear it from Jaya O'Connor, or as a lot of people or fans would know him as Pi. You can hear the bass is pretty well audible. Drumming, I mean, Ben Gordon's drumming is just superb. It's just spot on. But without further ado, let's dive into this album track by track. Now, the album opens up with Wishing Wells, which is actually the first single from this album. It's 5 minutes long, and right from the get-go, it starts off very gloomy with sort of like a spoken word intro from Winston, which then it ultimately just, boom, explodes into ferocity with pummeling bass and jackhammering drums. It's just a pretty solid track, I do say so. And then we go into Pray, which is kind of musically reminds me of something from like Ailstorm. Kind of has that kind of folk metal-y vibe. Mainly it's like the guitars and stuff. I feel like lyrically it's like a social commentary on our apathetic, hate-filled, self-medicating demise as a society. Yeah, and it's sort of like the knowledge that we all pray for the sorrow. Absolute Power, where it has some killer bass work from Pi, and just love some like the gritty vocals from Winston. I just think it's a pretty good song. Next song on the album is called Cemetery Bloom, which feels kind of like cinematic in nature, destined to score in sort of like an apocalyptic thriller with sort of like the vocal chant, and sort of like whispered verses and ominous atmospheres all throughout the name of self-sacrifice and betterment. Then we go into The Void, which to me, I didn't really think that song was that great. I mean, that was sort of like something from like 1980s heavy metal. No, I mean, I do like some 80s metal, but for fucking Parkway Drive, I mean, I just didn't really care for this song a whole lot. I'm sorry. I know some fans are probably going to hate me for that, but that's just my goddamn opinion. Anyway, moving on to the next song, I Hope You Rot, which features some modern, topically speaking, and the sort of like the music lyrically, a track sort of like delves into the weight of like child abuse within the Catholic Church, and the ferocity of emotion here creates like a truly killer standout offering, and I really think it's a pretty good song. And then we go into Shadowboxing, which in my opinion is probably one of these standout tracks on here, in my opinion. And this right here is where the first time, well, you hear it a little bit with Ire, but Shadowboxing really showcases Winston's vocals right here. Like, the first time I actually hear him, like, actually do clean vocals, and he's actually surprisingly a pretty good singer. I would love to have seen him, imagine some of his clean vocals on, like, some, like, older stuff, like Horizons and Deep Blue. And he actually does, like, almost kind of, like, speed rapping with sort of, like, a gritty dance on there. And it's just a really interesting song. And I actually think he has some really great vocal range on this track. Really good song. And also continuing to sort of mix things up. They sort of like went with sort of a symphonic metal approach on the song In Blood, with sort of like the dueling guitars and the overall massive stomp that communicates the band's legacy of battling for what they believe in themselves. It's just sheer metal guitars that bite the ear, so like a catchy, sort of like over 6 minute long symphonically dusted Chronos. It's sort of like an epic growling romp throughout the persistence of time. And then the album closes with the song The Colors of Leaving, sort of like a gentle discussion of moving on from loss, and includes some like beautiful strings, and ends with Nicole Winston sort of like asking sort of like emotional hypotheticals as his footsteps blend within the howling of the wind. Now, overall, Reverence by Parkway Drive is sort of like a step into a new direction, sort of like, I guess a lot of people consider like a new chapter for the band. And I do definitely do so myself. You could definitely tell from Ire and into Reverence, they went with a huge new direction. And I'm pretty interested to see what they have coming up with this. And for overall, if I were to give this album a score, I'd probably give this a solid, probably 8 out of 10. You could definitely tell that they sort of like did some new stuff, and for the most part, it actually works out. I know a lot of people sort of like had mixed feelings, especially with the first songs like Wishing Wells and The Void, but overall the album is pretty good. It's a solid addition to the discography. But yeah, that's my review of the new Parkway Drive album. Let me know in the comments what you guys think about it, and I'll see you all in the next video, and keep it metal.